The concrete edge of the Shinjuku pedestrian bridge felt icy against the young girl's trembling sneakers. For years, Fuuko Izumo had carried a heavy curse that transformed every single human touch into an absolute death sentence of terrible misfortune. She adjusted her oversized red beanie, trying desperately to shut out the overwhelming noise of the crowded Tokyo streets below. Having just finished reading her absolute favorite romantic manga series, she felt there was simply nothing left keeping her tied to this lonely world. One final step forward into the empty air would permanently ensure that no other innocent person would ever die because of her accidental contact. Suddenly, a violent and incredibly powerful grip clamped firmly around her covered shoulder, instantly shattering the heavy silence. Fuuko gasped loudly as she was yanked violently backward, tumbling onto the hard concrete walkway away from the steep drop. Standing directly above her was a towering, incredibly muscular man with short silver hair and an absolute madman's grin plastered across his face. She immediately noticed a strange rectangular metallic card driven deep straight into the center of his forehead. Fuuko screamed at the stranger, warning him to back away instantly before her terrible curse could take effect on his bare skin. The strange man simply laughed out loud, completely ignoring her desperate warnings as he took a bold step forward. He explained that he had been searching the entire globe for something truly powerful enough to end his own agonizing existence. Fuuko stared in utter disbelief, wondering if this bizarre individual had completely lost his mind from some terrible accident. Without a single shred of hesitation, Andy reached out and intentionally grabbed her bare wrist with his warm hand. Fuuko gasped in horror as she felt the familiar, ominous surge of unluck rapidly unlocking from deep within her soul. Instantly, a massive, out-of-control city bus swerved violently off the main road directly below them with a deafening screech of burning tires. The heavy vehicle plowed straight into the structural concrete pillar supporting the very overpass they were standing on. The concrete floor beneath their feet cracked wide open, instantly dropping both of them straight down into the chaotic destruction below. A massive sheet of falling metal framing sliced cleanly through Andy's torso, completely severing his upper body in a horrific display. Fuuko screamed in absolute agony, squeezing her eyes shut as she braced for the inevitable impact with the hard asphalt. Instead of the cold ground, she landed heavily, but safely on top of a large, soft pile of discarded rubber tires stored behind a nearby shop. She quickly sat up and looked around the smoking wreckage, searching for any sign of the strange silver-haired man. To her utter shock, Andy's severed torso was already standing upright on the pavement, generating massive strands of bright red muscle fibers. Within a matter of seconds, his body was completely whole again, and he flexed his arms with an expression of pure unadulterated joy. He yelled out that the sheer level of misfortune he just experienced was absolutely the greatest sensation he had felt in over 100 years. Fuuko could only stare blankly, her mind entirely incapable of processing the impossible biological regeneration occurring right before her eyes. Andy strode over to her with heavy, deliberate steps, introducing himself simply as an undead being who genuinely could never perish. He realized that the longer and more intimate his physical contact was with her, the more cataclysmic the resulting unluck would ultimately become. If he could manage to truly win her heart and hold her close, the universe might finally grant him the grand, definitive death he so deeply craved. Fuuko immediately recoiled from his close proximity, absolutely terrified by his completely unhinged logic and forward behavior. Before she could even attempt to run away into the crowd, a strange, high-pitched mechanical tracking sound began to echo loudly through the alley. Andy's wild expression instantly vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look as he scanned the upper rooftops of the surrounding buildings. Three heavily armed figures clad in sleek high-tech tactical armor materialized silently out of the thick smoke screen. The lead soldier announced through a metallic vocal synthesizer that both targets were classified as illegal negators and must be apprehended immediately. Fuuko whimpered softly, having absolutely no idea what the term negator meant or why these dangerous people were hunting them down. Andy stepped out directly in front of her, shielding her entire small frame completely from the lasers of the incoming weapons. He whispered to her to hold on tightly, because they were about to turn this entire city block into an absolute circus of blood and chaos. The elite tactical soldiers raised their advanced weapons in unison, their fingers tightening instantly on the triggers. Fuuko realized with absolute dread that her chance at a quiet, peaceful departure from this life had completely vanished into thin air. As the soldiers unleashed a deafening volley of high-energy rounds, Andy grabbed Fuuko and leaped directly into the line of fire. The high-energy rounds tore through Andy's torso in a blinding spray of crimson light. Instead of screaming, the immortal man laughed out loud as his shredded flesh immediately began to knit back together. Fuuko squeezed her eyes shut tightly, clutching the back of his tattered coat while the shockwaves rattled her teeth. The uniformed line of faceless tactical operatives advanced through the smoke with synchronized precision. These attackers belonged to the Union, a secretive global organization dedicated to hunting down anomalous rule-breakers. Andy realized that ordinary physical attacks would never break through this heavily armed containment unit. He spun around instantly and grabbed Fuuko by her bare wrist, disregarding her warning cries. A massive streak of localized violet lightning crackled across the sky the moment their skin connected. Fuuko wept as she explained that the longer the physical contact lasted, the more cataclysmic the resulting disaster would become. Hearing this, Andy laughed even louder and pulled her small body flush against his bare chest. The lead Union enforcer barked an immediate order to increase the caliber of their heavy weapons. A mechanical drone high above them hummed to life, locking its targeting reticle directly onto Fuuko's head. The ominous red laser dot danced across her pale forehead, signaling an impending explosive strike. Andy told her to trust his regenerative capabilities as he shifted his stance into a low, athletic crouch. He severed his own right leg at the knee joint using a sharp, focused burst of compressed blood pressure. The detached limb did not merely drop, it launched forward like a high-velocity rocket propelled by explosive bone regeneration. The oncoming soldiers tried to re-aim their weapons, but the flying biological projectile shattered their frontline defenses instantly. Because the leg carried Fuuko's potent Unluck curse, a freak mechanical failure caused the overhead drone to plummet directly into the squad. A brilliant, deafening explosion consumed the center of the street, flipping heavy military trucks into the air like mere toys. Within 3 seconds, a brand new muscular leg regenerated completely onto Andy's hip with a soft, organic snapping sound. Fuuko stared open-mouthed at the pristine limb, realizing his immortality completely bypassed the lethal consequence of her curse. Out from the burning wreckage stepped a tall man wearing an immaculate black suit and a metallic silver visor. This was a high-ranking Negator hunter, an elite operative who possessed an active negation ability of his own. He raised a single finger, and the ambient gravity around Andy and Fuuko suddenly intensified tenfold. Fuuko collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath as an invisible weight crushed her shoulders toward the earth. Andy grunted through clenched teeth, his superior muscular density allowing him to remain upright against the crushing force. Realizing that proximity increased the curse potency, Andy reached down and forcefully ripped off Fuuko's heavy winter jacket. She screamed in protest as more bare skin was exposed directly to the open, volatile atmosphere. Andy grabbed her shoulders tightly, grinning wildly as his own skin began to blister from the proximity of her aura. High above the city clouds, a massive meteoroid suddenly altered its orbital path, drawn by the absolute misfortune accumulating below. The visored elite hunter noticed the sudden temperature spike and checked his handheld scanner with growing alarm. He quickly gestured to deactivate his gravity field, preparing to sprint away from the designated Ground Zero zone. Andy anticipated the retreat and instantly lunged forward, tackling the elite enforcer around his waist to pin him down. The hunter slammed his fists into Andy's back, breaking bones that mended themselves faster than the strikes could land. Fuuko ran toward them, shouting for Andy to let go before the looming sky disaster obliterated everything within a mile radius. Andy ignored her pleas, using his own regenerating muscles to bind the hunter in an inescapable steel-like embrace. The massive meteor split the clouds apart with a sound like tearing metal, illuminating the entire Shinjuku district in midday brightness. The elite hunter screamed in pure terror as the blinding white-hot heat wave vaporized his tailored black clothing. Right before total impact, Andy threw Fuuko backward into a reinforced underground subway stairwell to protect her from the blast wave. As the sky collapsed in an apocalypse of fire and stone, a giant shadow emerged from the subway depths behind Fuuko. The giant shadow looming from the subway depths instantly swallowed the remaining ambient light in the ruined street. Andy lunged forward through the smoke to grab Fuuko before the massive entity could strike. Suddenly, the entire landscape froze as a blinding golden sigil manifested in the upper sky. Descending slowly from the glowing rift, Juz stood firm with her silver armor gleaming brilliantly. With a calm yet terrifying expression, she reached up and unmasked her face to reveal piercing golden eyes. Juz declared that the laws of the universe were hers to alter as she activated her core ability. The reality-warping entities surrounding them began to convulse and mutate violently under her gaze. Fuuko covered her ears as a deafening spatial screech echoed through the collapsing dimension. Juz turned her focus directly to Andy and demanded that he fulfill his original ancient promise. Andy grimaced in pain as a sudden sharp headache throbbed behind the metallic card in his forehead. A horde of floating, eye-covered spheres materialized out of thin air to surround the trio. Juz stated that these entities were the regulators sent to eliminate any anomalies in the current loop. The massive onslaught began as hundreds of lasers shot simultaneously from the floating spheres. Andy swung his arm wildly, letting his blood spray outward to form a rapid defensive barrier. The sheer volume of attacks shattered the blood barrier within a fraction of a second. Juz stepped directly into the crossfire, casually deflecting the reality-warping lasers with her bare hands. She explained that to defeat these universal rules, Andy needed to access his forgotten past. Andy reached up and pressed his fingers hard against the edges of the metallic card embedded in his skull. With a brutal pull, he began to force the card slightly outward from his forehead. A torrential flood of black and white memories instantly rushed into Andy's consciousness. He saw visions of himself sitting alone on a barren earth for thousands of years. In the center of his memories stood an enigmatic figure whose face remained entirely obscured by shadow. The sheer weight of the unlocked memories caused Andy to scream as blue lightning erupted from his body. Fuuko watched in awe as the shockwave of his aura pushed away the attacking entities. Juz nodded in approval as she witnessed the true immortal persona begin to reawaken. Andy's eyes turned completely pitch black, with glowing white pupils as his power surged. He leaped into the sky with impossible speed, leaving a trail of shattered reality behind him. With a single massive strike of his blood-enhanced blade, he sliced the giant regulator sphere in half. The giant entity exploded into a massive shockwave of black fluid and reality alterations. Andy free fell back to Earth, landing heavily on his knees next to Fuuko as the card slid back into his head. Fuuko asked if he was all right, noticing that his expression had become profoundly solemn. Andy looked up and muttered that he finally remembered the true name of the world's creator. Juz landed gracefully before them, stating that their brief victory had triggered an even worse rule reinforcement. She pointed out toward the horizon where the clouds were turning a deep, unnatural autumn crimson. A massive multi-legged silhouette began to materialize within the crimson clouds, spanning across miles. Juz revealed that the entity Autumn had been awakened ahead of schedule due to their temporal interference. Andy stood up completely, his grip tightening on his sword hilt as he stared at the approaching threat. Fuuko stepped up beside him, realizing that her unluck was the only thing that could pierce that scale. As the sky began to bleed a viscous red rain, a deep mechanical roar vibrated through their very bones. Suddenly, the card in Andy's head pulsed violently once more, flashing an entirely new set of golden coordinates before his eyes. The burning golden coordinates flashing inside Andy's vision pointed directly toward a massive swirling spatial rift, tearing open the skies of Canada. Fuuko tightly gripped the edge of her iconic red beanie as a violent, unnatural gale threatened to rip her off her feet. Grinning wildly, Andy firmly grabbed Fuuko by the waist and pulled her body close to steady her against the supernatural storm. From the center of the interdimensional rift, a colossal crystalline entity known as Autumn descended upon the earth. The massive beast unleashed a piercing shriek that resonated through the landscape, transforming nearby trees into literal paper books. Andy recognized the entity's reality-warping power immediately, knowing that a single direct scratch would turn them both into stories. Fuuko gasped in horror as she observed several Union scouts already immobilized, their bodies completely flattened into bound manuscripts. Refusing to hesitate, Andy sliced into his own right wrist to trigger a high-pressure jet stream of crimson blood. He propelled himself directly into the air using his signature parts bullet technique, soaring toward the monstrous insect. Autumn swung one of its massive razor-sharp crystal legs downward to swat the incoming Immortal out of the sky. The strike cleanly severed Andy's torso in half, but his immortal body began regenerating instantly before the pieces even hit the ground. Landing a heavy blow on Autumn's outer carapace, Andy smirked as his blade merely chipped the seemingly indestructible amber shell. Realizing physical attacks were insufficient, he shouted down to Fuuko, reminding her that they needed a massive manifestation of Unluck. Fuuko closed her eyes tightly, running through the forest while brainstorming the ultimate method to maximize her lethal touch. She knew that the longer she held onto Andy, and the deeper her emotional affection, the more cataclysmic the disaster would be. Suddenly, the rest of the Union task force arrived on the battlefield, unleashing a barrage of high-tech weaponry to distract Autumn. The creature roared in frustration as the heavy artillery cracked its armored joints, slowing its rapid regeneration. Seizing the perfect opening, Andy dropped down from the clouds and landed right beside Fuuko with an impactful thud. Fuuko didn't hesitate for a single second, discarding her gloves and wrapping her bare arms tightly around Andy's neck. A massive blinding aura of deep crimson and blue light instantly erupted from the point of their physical contact. Andy laughed heartily as he felt the sheer weight of the impending cosmic misfortune locking onto their exact location. Sensing an existential threat to its survival, Autumn ignored the Union forces and charged directly toward the glowing couple. Andy held Fuuko secure with one arm while raising his free hand toward the heavens, welcoming the incoming disaster. The clouds above parted completely, revealing an enormous rogue-burning meteor breaking through the Earth's atmosphere. This astronomical manifestation of Unluck was the direct result of Fuuko's absolute love and deep bond with the immortal warrior. Autumn attempted to halt its advance and retreat, but the sheer gravitational pull of the falling star locked it in place. With a final desperate burst of strength, Andy used his blood blade to sever his own legs once more, launching himself and Fuuko out of the impact zone. The colossal meteor slammed directly into Autumn's core, triggering a massive apocalyptic shockwave that vaporized everything within miles. The blast wave rippled across the landscape, shattering the remaining spatial rifts and restoring the paper books back into living humans. Andy and Fuuko tumbled onto a soft patch of grass miles away, safely clear of the devastating final impact. The core of Autumn was completely obliterated, leaving behind absolutely no traces of its transformative reality-warping threat. Fuuko looked down at her bare hands, realizing that she had successfully used her Unluck to save the world without accidentally killing Andy. Andy's body regenerated completely within seconds, and he sat up to look at his brave partner with immense pride. He reached out and gently placed a hand over hers, showing that their bond had officially transcended the fear of her curse. The Union communication devices crackled, with Jews sending a message confirming that all global anomalies had finally been stabilized. Fuuko leaned her head against Andy's muscular shoulder, finally feeling a profound sense of safety and emotional closure. Andy smiled, knowing that while his ultimate wish for death remained, he was perfectly content living to protect her. Together, they had transformed their terrible curses into an invincible partnership capable of defying the laws of the universe. Their chaotic journey had led them to a beautiful understanding where immortality and misfortune perfectly balanced one another. Hand in hand, the ultimate duo walked forward into the light of a brand new day, ready to face whatever rules the world threw at them next.